Right guys, so today we're going to run through a push training session and I'm just going to talk you through the exercises, let you guys know my thinking, and hopefully you guys will learn a little bit from this and enjoy the workout too, and you can try it yourselves. So this is going to be an incline fly, so we want the cables to go from low to high, so they're starting at the bottom. We've got the bench set up pretty upright because when we're in position for this one, we want our upper pec fibres, we want them to be the highest point so that they're doing the majority of the pulling. Now, with any exercise like this, with any exercise at all, we're never going to isolate the fibres at the upper pec. You can't do that. You can't just simply isolate them and not use anything else. But we're going to try and bias them the most, or bring them into the exercise as much as we can. So that's what we're going to try and set up here. Definitely not, no tension there at all. So we went with a cuff variation on this. To be honest, this just feels comfier to me. You can do this just with like a D-hand or something like that. It's not really going to be an issue, but when we use a cuff and we put it like halfway up our arm and we're applying it closer to the axis we're moving around, we're reducing the overall joint forces. It does mean we'll have to use more load to create the same stimulus, but you know, if you've got like shoulder niggles or things like that, this can be a really useful way of like still training your pecs without fucking up your shoulders essentially. So definitely worth giving it a try. I'm also using the daisy chains, which just bring it out a little bit more, because obviously if I was to set this up right from the bottom and try and get my arms into that, it'd be a nightmare. I mean, this exercise is hard enough to get into to begin with, so these things definitely help. Get them on Amazon fairly cheap and they can handle a lot of load. 300 kilos per loop apparently.
Seriously?
Ah, they're for climbing, the climbing slings.
Oh, right.
Yeah, quite useful. So with this exercise, I'm starting with my arms like kind of as close in as I can to my torso, slightly abducted. And then from there, we're thinking about taking the inside of our elbows and driving them up towards our chin and slowly back down from there. And there's probably not an exercise I've done before where I've felt my upper pec as kind of targeted as I do in this. Right across there.
See with that exercise, does it matter which arm you have going above the other one?
No, not really. I just kind of cross over because I'm not thinking about my arms at all. I'm thinking about the pecs. Pecs are coming on, obviously attaching onto the arms, but I'm just thinking like point A closer to point B, and I don't suppose it's going to make much difference really. But the good thing about that one is we're getting into that short position, particularly with those upper fibres. And then, you know, targeting that early in the workout, because in a shortened position, our muscles will tire quicker. So actually training the shortened position first makes a lot of sense. But then the caveat to that is like you do exercises like bench press or flat dumbbell press, And when you get into a lengthened position, we tend to see more muscle growth there. So the caveat is, could you do them first with more load essentially and get more out of that? So you know, there's pros and cons both ways. And to be honest, probably overthinking it with that shit too, but it's fun to think about. So we're going to move on to some flat bench press, and usually this would be like a dumbbell press for me, but because we're in the studio, we've only got up to 40s, too strong for them. So, but no, we're going to move on to some flat bench press instead. And again, with this one, it's obviously going to be more of like a lengthened range bias, and what I mean by that is like the pec is stretched out at the bottom. That's where we're going to feel the most of this exercise. When you're at the top and you're holding the bar in your hand and your arms are kind of stacked like that, you know, you can hold it there all day. But the exercise gets a lot harder at the bottom. So that's what I mean when I'm saying these things. When I'm saying shortened range bias or lengthened range bias, it's like it's where the exercise is hard and where the exercise is easy. Like some exercises like this, as I say, really hard at the bottom, really effective at the bottom, but not so effective at the top. And it doesn't make them a bad exercise just because they're only effective at one bit of the range. But we've got to use other exercises then throughout, or it makes sense to anyway, use other exercises throughout our training week to target the kind of more shortened range of those muscles. So we've already targeted the upper pec into a shortened range, not so much the rest of the pec, but it definitely will have played a role in that. But now we're moving on to like just some lengthened range bias here throughout most of the pec, to be honest. The thing with bench pressing in particular is like a lot of people will like say, you know, you've got to touch the bar off your chest. And for someone like me, when I test this, when I'm going to do something like this, yeah, I can certainly bring the bar and touch my chest. But if you've got super long arms, shallow rib cage, you're going to find it hard to touch the bar off your chest. And then obviously you're not going to get as much length into your pec. So whenever you're doing any sort of exercise, something that makes sense is like testing the motion first. Like how far can you get by actually just contracting your muscles? And then anything beyond that, the weight's forcing you into. So if I can only get to there, but when I do the bench press I end up all the way down, that's going into what's called a passive range. And for some people that can potentially start causing niggles, injuries, osteophytes, you know, all sorts of different things. So it's something to be aware of. What is the specific range of motion you have available for that exercise? A big thing with exercises like this, or exercises in general to be honest, not just this, but I see it a lot in this. I see a lot of guys like throwing the bar about and trying to move it as quick as possible. And like if you're training to build muscle, you don't want to be like throwing it about and moving it as quick as possible. Definitely if you're like trying to be a powerlifter and lift as much load as possible, but when you're trying to build muscle, you're trying to get tension on the muscle, and you also want to keep your joints healthy over time. So when people tend to hurt themselves in the gym, it's not usually these like sudden kind of injuries. It's more like over time doing something in a less than optimal way. That's probably a good way to put it. But you know, a lot of people just let the bar come down really fast and then struggle their way back up. And then when that momentum starts coming down, that's something starts moving. When something's moving at speed, it's harder to stop. So you're making it way harder at the bottom, struggling your way up, and your joints are not going to like that either. So we want to maintain control throughout. We're in control of the weights. It's not doing what it wants to do. We're not letting gravity pull it down. We're staying in control. Said that in a really kind of roundabout way, didn't I?
No, got the point across.
That 10's going pretty hard, yes. Bigger 10 than 20.
So are you just working up to 2 working sets, or is that the plan? Yeah,
so most things I kind of do 2 working sets, but I have this kind of internal kind of thing where I'm like, I know I'm trying to train, you know, this particular muscle here, try to train my chest here, and if I can do like 1 or 2 sets and get enough out of that, then I'll leave it at that. But if I do 1 or 2 sets and I'm like, I don't feel like I've really trained that muscle enough, I've not really fatigued it enough, then I will do maybe 1 or 2 more. So it's kind of like, internally, in my head usually it's like 2 working sets, but internally I'm like, right, okay, if that wasn't enough, I'll do a little bit more, if you know what I mean. So I'm kind of getting that internal feedback to decide on what I'm doing. Rep range wise, again, I'm not married to rep ranges. Like it's just intensity that I'm chasing. So it's like if I'm using a load, say it's 100 kilos for example, I'll do that until I'm comfortably doing like really good sets at that, and like my form's there. Because like it's not just about the load, the number of weight or the number of reps. It's about how you're doing that as well, because you know I could start pushing the weights up and start moving it really fast and using a lot of momentum and shit like that and get stronger over time, but is that putting more tension on my muscles? Potentially not. So it's like everything comes into play. I almost have like a grading system. It's like I use a traffic light system, that's what I use. It's like red, amber or green. Like once it's up to green, comfortably doing sets with the right tempo, with the right form, and like solid starts and stops and things like that, then I'll progress up to the next weight. So in any sort of chest movement, any sort of pressing movement, we want to try and like extend through our upper back. A lot of people say like pinch your shoulder blades together, but like, you know, if you pinch your shoulder blades together and really pinch them together, like your arms wouldn't want to move because of a thing called scapulohumeral rhythm. Sounds really fancy. It's basically just wheel this guy over. Basically just whenever you move your arm, your shoulder blade's not fixed like this guy's is. Your shoulder blade wants to move with your arm so that it can receive the head of your upper arm. So that always kind of needs to happen. So we don't want to pinch the shoulder blades back too much. We want to just bring our chest up. And another cool thing about that as well is it just makes our pec muscles a bit more efficient too. So you're actually going to be stronger pressing like that.
So you see a lot of these powerlifters, they do look like they have an awful arched back. Is that okay to have, or?
Well, I mean, it's tactical for them, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's trying to get into, again, give their pecs as much efficiency as possible, but also some of these guys are just trying to move the bar as little as possible. But that depends on how much like lumbar spine extension you can get into. So if you can actively get into that much extension and it doesn't cause you any issues, then and your goal is to move the bar from A to B, then yeah, totally. But most of us aren't going to have a huge amount of that available, but we will have some. So I mean, using some of it to your advantage to make your pecs more efficient, then totally, that makes sense for a bit of muscle. But you know, some of the extremes that some powerlifters go to might not make sense for building muscle because the range of motion is so limited. The first thing everyone always asks you when you, like, if they don't know anything about the gym, they're like, what do you bench? And like that's the most important thing in the world. And honestly, I think this is one of the most overrated exercises in the gym. But not to say it's a bad exercise by any means, it's just overrated in the sense that like, it's the first thing people ask you, what do you bench? But usually, I don't really bench press. I'm not a big fan of it. Like, I feel there's much more benefits with something like a dumbbell press. And in terms of like building your chest, you can get obviously a little bit more depth if you've got it available, but also like you can get into that arm path that you want to move in rather than being fixed in some sort of arm path that the bar's moving you into, because obviously the bar's fixed. You can't really move like this if you want to because the bar's up here. You have to kind of go with the bar, which is obviously in that fixed position. So it's not that it's bad, and I would say never use it, but personally I don't rate it that much. But it's still a tool, like every exercise. Every exercise is a tool, and there's going to be a time and place where it might be appropriate. Like right now, when we've not got enough weight in the dumbbells. Sure, keep writing that. My legs look big. So we're going to do something slightly different this set in the back off set. Now we're just down to 80 kilos, not a lot of weight, but what we're going to do is we're going to squeeze inwards on the bar. And what that's going to do is add some friction to the bar, and it's just going to change some of the forces, and actually it'll put our pec under more tension. So something that's cool with this, and definitely go try it out yourself, is that we can actually put more tension on the pec, but with less weight. So it just goes to show that it's not always just about the weight that we're using. There is hidden forces that are going to impact stuff. So definitely give this a try out and see for yourself.
filming that, it's quite hard to see like the difference in what you're actually doing there. You know, because it just looks like the same, but
yeah. But if you imagine the bar as ice, you'd want your hands to slide inwards. That's what we're trying to think. Hopefully your bar isn't covered in ice, so hopefully the gym's not that cold. So we've finished with bench press, and now we're moving on to a cable chest press. Usually I would use like some sort of machine press at this point, but again we've not got one of them in here, so we're going to use the cable chest press. And this time we're going to just aim for like kind of mid to like kind of lower fibres of the pec. And the way I've got it set up is we don't set the bench completely upright, we've got it set one back. And the reason for that is like what I was talking about earlier. We want to get the chest up nice and high, and we want the chest to be the kind of furthest forward point relevant to the resistance. If you're kind of crunching into your pressing like that, well, you're going to feel it in your fucking shoulders. Like the amount of people that say, oh, I can't feel my chest when I'm pressing, that's because you press like this. You want to keep your chest up nice and high, and let your chest be in front of your shoulders. Let that pec pull the arm across the body, rather than letting the shoulders round and get in front. In terms of the height of setting these up, we're setting these up again about mid-chest, because that's what we're trying to work here. And we've already took the upper pec into that kind of shortened position, but this is going to take that kind of mid to lower pec into a shortened range here and challenge it pretty hard from there. Having said that though, the weight does go from being like slightly heavier here when the cable's further away from our shoulder, and it gets slightly lighter, but what we experience is just difficult all the way through, which is what we want, a full range challenge. The other benefit of this press as well, like compared to like the bench press we were doing the last exercise, like we can get our pec into that fully short position, like I said, we can converge inwards, whereas with the bench press, you're not really getting fully short, you're just kind of going up like that. You are getting shorter, but you're not getting fully short, so that's another benefit of this. We go from weak to strong as we press, but we've got that constant tension here that is just making it hard all the way through. Something to think about with your pec training too is obviously your pec looks something like that. It's not a great representation, but something like that. And it's pulling the arm across the body. So when I'm doing that exercise, I'm thinking about taking my bicep and driving it into the side of my chest to get that pec as shortened as possible. But look where that sits. That's sitting on top of your rib cage. So obviously when you breathe in, you can expand your rib cage, and when you breathe out, you're going to like compress it. So we can use that to our advantage. We can take a big deep breath in at the bottom of the exercise where we're weaker to help our pec gain a bit more efficiency, and then do our breathing out kind of at the top. But again, be careful not to like crunch over into it and bring your shoulders kind of forward as you're doing that. So before I do the next set, like something to think about in this too is like, we could have done like a pec fly here in the cables, but what's the difference between the press and the fly? Because your shoulder and your pec, they're not really going to know much difference. It's still this movement, whether you do it like this or whether you do it like this. We're still going from lengthen to shorten at the pec. So something to think about, like, is there any benefit of actually doing a fly over doing a press, or doing some sort of in-between thing, which I'm probably doing. Again, we get caught up in these names of exercises. Think of muscles, not the names of movements. Don't get too caught up in the names.
So you're saying a fly and a press are pretty much the same?
At the pec, pretty much, yeah. It's going to be different, obviously, at your elbow joint. Not really your shoulder, but at your elbow joint it's going to be slightly different, because again, when people come out with that straight arm when they're doing a fly, your bicep is crossing this joint and this joint. It's getting really stretched out there, and it's in quite a compromised position at the back there. So again, thinking about with the pecs, what's the difference between this and this? Your pec doesn't cross your elbow joint. That's the only difference there. Again, just to clarify, because people hear things I say and they take them and they change them into something else. They hear what they want to hear. I'm not saying never do a fly by any means, but just think about what's actually happening in the muscle rather than exercise names and get caught up in exercise names. Something else to think about with press, and me and Johnny were just talking about there, it's like when you're doing a press and you've got the weight in your hand, imagine the line of force like either a cable, the cable's the line of force in this one, so it's really easy to see, or like gravity pulling the dumbbell down or something. Hopefully you can see this quite well, but like if the line of force is going straight from my forearm and my forearm's like directly in front of my elbow, then there's going to be not minimal like tricep involvement, but there's going to be less. But if we come in here and then like say that dumbbell's pulling us around like that, well, you know, obviously that tricep's going to get a bit more involvement, and then in the fly movement, if the weight's pulling us out like that, well, the bicep's going to get more involvement. So that's something to think about as well when you're doing these movements. So now we're going to move on to some triceps, and usually like in my push sessions or this push session, usually I go straight into like some side raises, but I've kind of stopped doing that because I end up like fatiguing my side delts, and then when I move on to my tricep stuff, those muscles are still working. Now you're probably looking and thinking, why the fuck is he saying side delts are still working when he's doing triceps? Because whenever you're doing any exercise, like there's a whole team of muscles that are working. It doesn't mean they've all got the ball, and I stole that quote from Tom Purvis, so I better like reference him there, but you know, the triceps are the ones that have the ball, but certainly things like your side delts, well, they're going to help maintain the integrity of the shoulder joint when you're doing that. They're going to help maintain the plane, meaning like they're going to stop you, like if you're moving through this kind of plane, they're going to stop you from kind of falling out kind of all different directions. So there's all that to consider too, so there's always like a host of things going on whenever you're doing one exercise. This is how there's no such thing as an isolation exercise. So we're going to do the triceps first, because as I say, when I end up like burning out my side delt and I go to the triceps, all I feel is my side delt. So triceps first and then side delts. Starting with the cable crossover push down. Now with this one, our shoulders are going to be back and we're going into a fully extended position at the bottom. So we're getting our tricep into a fully shortened position because the tricep crosses the elbow joint, but the long head also crosses the shoulder joint, so we need to like have our arms extended and our shoulders extended to get into that fully shortened position at the bottom. So that's what we're going to do with this one, targeting that range first. The exercise itself will go from being like, well, depending on where you stand, will go from being kind of lighter to heavier to lighter, which kind of matches the muscle, which is actually what we want. So we should get a kind of good full range challenge here. One of the benefits of this exercise is that when we're going through the motion, we can actually just let our arms move the way they want to move. So everyone's like elbow axis is going to be slightly different, it's going to be slightly offset in a different direction. So when I do this movement, I end up out there. Your arms might end up like a lot closer or something like that, depending on your elbow. So doing it like this allows you to move the way you kind of naturally want to move, and it helps obviously offset any like forces being out of the plane or out of alignment with your joint. So when someone does something like a barbell skull crusher or easy back bar skull crusher, the way your joint wants to move, which is usually kind of offset like this, and then the way the bar wants to move like totally differently to that, like it's totally out of the plane, and that can cause some serious issues. Like a lot of guys that do heavy easy bar skull crushers and things like that, over time their elbows end up fucked, and usually that's what it is. It's like me, see that door there, right? If we look at the hinges on that door, they're moving in a particular plane. Now if I open this door, and if I were to hang off here, like this, those hinges aren't going to like that very much. So it's like doing the same thing with your elbows. Another thing with tricep training as well is a neutral grip is always going to be superior, because anyone who's done any sort of push down with an overhand grip, you'll find that as you go down, you end up having to like internally rotate to get your triceps fully shortened. So now we're moving on to an overhead cable tricep extension, because the first exercise we done, we targeted, or we got into a shortened range with the tricep anyway. We didn't so much target it specifically, we kind of got a full range challenge there. But now we're moving on to the overhead extension. Now, what this does when you get to this position overhead, that fully lengthens the tricep. That would be my tricep like pretty much fully lengthened there. So that's what we're trying to achieve. Now, where a lot of people go wrong with this exercise is they'll do something that's like out of alignment. So like what we're trying to do is, again, cable's your line of force in this one. So you want to move your body, get your elbow pointing towards the ceiling, but have the cable moving in the same plane as your arm. So it should be like, the cable should be kind of right behind your arm almost. And then make sure you're getting all the way down into that fully stretched position. We're going to be pretty weak down there. So make sure you're going all the way down. Your head's going to tell you to kind of stop halfway, go all the way down, full stretch, and extend back up. You can see I'm just moving myself to get into a position to align this arm this time. And it's going to depend how much like internal or external rotation you're going to set in that shoulder as well. So it might be slightly different angles for each arm or each side. Within the same plane, and that sounds confusing because that used to confuse me too. But think of it like this, like your windscreen wiper moves in the same plane as your windscreen, it moves across the windscreen. So that's kind of like, that's an easy definition of moving in the same plane. So again, with this, we want to make sure that cable is moving in the same plane as my arm. So if I was doing a tricep extension like this, the cable would want to be in line with my arm. So same idea when we're doing this, okay? Same idea with basically all of arm training. We want the resistance to align with the way that we are moving. And when it comes to doing biceps, this happens quite often, because like when I turn my palms out the way like that, like I would for a bicep curl, you can see my arms end up out here, and then they kind of like come inwards, up and inwards like that. Now, if you pick up a barbell and like do a close grip kind of curl like that, well, you have to move in a fixed position because the barbell's fixed. So like dumbbell or cable curls are going to be more beneficial because they're going to move in the same plane as your elbow. They're going to be more beneficial in the sense that like they're not going to fuck your joints up, and you're going to be able to train your biceps for many more years and then get many more gains. Fuck my elbows. Again, caught myself out a couple of reps there, just like not wanting to go right into that kind of deep stretch with it. So you've kind of got to be on yourself throughout that whole exercise, because it is tough, and like sometimes it means I'm probably just going to go down one pin for that, because it's obviously a little bit too heavy if I'm like shiting out going right to the bottom. But thing is as well, like when we're in quite a lengthened position with any muscle, like even like the bottom of a squat or something like that, you want to be in control there, because if your muscles are fairly lengthened and you are like losing leverage and you are getting weaker, you need to be in control. You can't let momentum take over, because that is potentially when we can get injured. So we're still in the cable stack, we're spending the whole workout here, but I'm going to start with a standing cable lateral raise. We're on the side delts now obviously, and we're going to go straight into a lying cable lateral raise, because what we can do here is, like when we do standing ones, we'll reach failure, but obviously when you're doing a standing lateral raise, your side delt actually has to hold up the weight of your arm. So that's a bit of part of the challenge. When we go to the lying ones, it becomes the front delt's job to hold up that weight of the arm, or more of the front delt's job. So we can actually get a bit more reps out of it when we jump straight into a lying lateral raise after a standing one. So this is a good way to get your lats kind of burning and getting kind of pumping them. So the angle of the bench doesn't really matter. You can kind of have the bench set up however you want. I've got the cuffs set up so that, again, you could use D-handles for this, but I would always kind of opt for cuffs. Especially like I put the cuff around my elbow because we're thinking side delt again. Side delt's going from our acromion process up here down into the deltoid tuberosity, but basically top of the shoulder to the upper arm. So the side delt doesn't cross the elbow joint, but we want to think about pushing our elbows out to the sides. We're doing this, we want to try and take the attachment away from what the hands are doing, and I find that I get a much better connection when I've got the cuffs around my elbows. So that's exactly what I'm trying to do here. Cuffs around the elbows, and then push it out to the side, slowly back down, and we're going to go to failure on here. This is obviously a bit light, this is a bit of a warm-up set, but once I do reach that kind of level of failure on here, straight into the line one, straight to my back, and just doing the exact same thing again, pushing the elbows out to the side, and we're just kind of thinking about our arms kind of sweeping low and wide as we go through this. So the delt is a kind of fan-shaped muscle as well, and like if you ever look at like Kapanji books, if anyone's ever looked at them, like they show like 7 sections of the delt. Like we know usually of like the 3 heads of the delt, the front, side and back, but Kapanji shows 7 sections of it, and basically what he's trying to say is there is crossovers between the front to mid, mid to back, and so on from there. But basically, depending on the way your bones are structured, your bones might not look exactly like that. Your side delt fibres might set a little bit differently, they might set a bit further back. So when you're doing a cable lateral raise, actually kind of backing up, for me and my delt structure, actually hits my side delts a bit better than going straight out to the sides like that. But this is like, it's a fan-shaped muscle, so like whatever direction you go in, the delt's still getting worked, so it just makes sense, like, to simplify that, to hit them from a few different angles. So we're going to do the cable lateral raise that I just showed you guys, and then we're going to go into a dumbbell one, so we're just hitting them from a couple of different angles. You can use things like a Y raise as well, again, just to hit it from a slightly different angle as well. Something that you hear a lot when it comes to side raises as well, and I've even said this in the past, and I'm wrong. If you ever watch any old videos of me and I'm saying it, I was wrong. But I'm happy to admit that. But when you're doing side raises, a lot of guys say, you know, turn your thumbs upside down, or imagine you're like pouring out like a jug of water. But what happens then is you internally rotate the shoulder, and we can see that the head of the humerus, there's this bit here at the top of the head of the humerus, and it's closing the gap between there and your acromion. So like, essentially that's what you're doing when you're tipping that glass of water. You're going from like that to like that. And then in here we've got like the long-headed bicep, we've got the supraspinatus, and when you start doing these with a lot of momentum, with that thumb tucked in, you're basically just smashing that in there. That's impingement. But impingement itself, if I do that right now, not an issue. But when I start doing that with a lot of weight and a lot of momentum, that's when we can run into issues with impingement there. The thinking with the internal rotation, the reason I used to say it is because it will place those side delt fibres higher, right? And whatever's on top of the axis is going to work. So think about it like this. If you wanted to train your rear delts with a dumbbell, you would bend over and do a rear delt fly like that, because it puts the rear delts on top of the axis. So with internal rotation, when you're doing the side raise, that's what people are thinking. So there is logic in that, but it's like, think of the joint first before we think of those sort of things. So that's why doing it with something like a cable, and then we can come backing up like that and hit the side delt fibres a little more accurately without going into internal rotation, can be a bit more beneficial. But yeah, always think joint first when it comes to this stuff. Another consideration when it comes to side delt training as well is feeling it in your traps. And this is like kind of unnecessary evil, because obviously your upper traps, they're going to run something like that. And they're always going to be playing a role there. They're always going to be in the team, like I've been talking about before. They're always going to be some sort of like supporting muscle. But as you do a side raise and as you're coming up, your scapula will probably stay in place till about armpit height. But once you get above that, now this guy's obviously stuck in place, it's screwed in place, but your scapula will begin to like upwardly rotate to meet the arm. It'll like want to follow the arm. So when that happens, obviously these upper traps play a role in upwardly rotating them. So when you're doing a side raise, if you want to try and keep the upper traps out of it as much as possible, just come up to armpit height. A lot of the time when people are feeling the upper traps, it's because they're going way up here, and then you are going to shorten your upper traps. Another thing as well is like what people talk about is rather than going out to the side, going in the what's called the scapular plane, so going like slightly in front, and then that takes weight out of alignment with the upper traps as well, and that's going to help limit their involvement too. So once we start doing our side raise and the side delts get shorter, and if your scapula didn't move, it would keep getting shorter. But because about this, on average about at this height, people's scapula starts to upwardly rotate. Because the scapula is moving with the arm, the side delt won't actually be getting any shorter. So once I'm kind of past here, the side delts stay in the same length. So we're not shortening it anymore, and there's no additional benefit. We're just getting that kind of upper trap workout when that happens. So we've done our cable lateral raises. The good thing about the cable ones that I probably never mentioned is they do drop off as we go through, because like when you do any sort of like side delt exercise, especially dumbbells and some dumbbell lateral raises, you'll realise obviously that you're a lot weaker at the top than you are at the bottom, and the dumbbell actually gets more efficient as you get towards the top. And obviously like this kind of mismatch, the weight gets heavier and we get weaker, so that's obviously what happens with this. So the effective part of this rep is only really the top wee bit of it, but it doesn't make it a bad exercise. A bit like the bench press, it's only really effective at the bottom, but it doesn't make it a bad exercise. We've just got to know when to use it. So we've kind of done our full range challenge on the cables, so now we're just like targeting that shortened range a little bit more. And the reason I do it this way around is purely because when I do a cable lateral raise, I get such a better burn in my side delts compared to this. But if I do the cable lateral raise first and then I jump onto this, I feel this a lot more. So it's just more for the sake of that internal feel, and that's not everything, but like it's just a way I like to do it. I always do these with a chest support because, again, like whenever we're training for muscle building, stability is key. Like you wouldn't fire a cannon out of a canoe, so you're going to be stronger when you've got more stability and less stuff to juggle. So again, with this one, you see a lot of people that are just fucking throwing weights about like that. That's not going to do you any good. That's training more momentum. So use the chest support. I've got that almost 90 degrees, just one back from that. Now just pushing the dumbbells out to the side. Try to spend a little moment at the top there. And again, I'm in that kind of scapular plane I was talking about there as well. And slowly down. Try to decelerate the dumbbells that are coming down. We're not going to go all the way up and then just let it drop down. That's a waste of time. That's doing nothing. Push out to the side. Hold it up here. Control down. And then move again. Try to squeeze those side delts the whole time. Keep tension on the muscle.
Lat raises are probably the most humbling exercise you can do in the gym.
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing these with like a 20-25 kilo dumbbell, you're probably doing them wrong.
Yeah. Like even sometimes you get a burn-in set 5 kilos, it just feels like the way of the world when you're trying to do them.
Exactly. I came full circle on it though. I was that guy way back, like got the 25s and just fucking blasted them up like there. Didn't feel any tension on my side delts. I mean, there would have been something, don't get me wrong, but I didn't feel much tension on them. Didn't care. Looked cool.
Yeah.
Gonna do something that I used to do back in the day and run the racks. So they might get a little bit messy, but we're just going to work our way down the rack now until we can barely move our arms. Should have started a bit heavier for it, but this will be fine.
Those 5 kilos are going to feel heavy.
Using all the momentum now with the fucking 5s. This is when it gets bad.
Watching you do that, it looks like your arms are coming very far forward. It looks nearly like a front raise.
Yeah.
Is that just you letting your arms just go the natural plane of where they?
Be a little bit in front. Because remember what I was talking about earlier, that kind of scapular plane rather than being straight out to the side, taking the traps out of alignment. But also because I'm leaning forward, it's going to keep the side delt on top. So that's another good reason for the bench. It's going to keep the side delt on top. But what do you see when people are struggling with them? What they end up doing is they end up turning their thumbs up to bring their front delt on top, because the front delt is going to be stronger. So again, that's another good thing about doing it with the bench. It keeps you in position. It keeps your side delt on top of the axis and keeps it working the hardest there. So that's that, guys, and that's the whole push workout. And again, I'll do this once per week, and then usually I do an upper body workout where in that I'll do like some sort of like shoulder pressing, because I've never actually done any shoulder pressing there. I like to keep at least kind of one overhead press in the program, although I'm not massive on them, because every kind of pressing exercise we've done there, we would have been getting a lot of front delts in there anyway, so I don't think there's a massive need for them, but I do still like to do one press overhead, just to even keep the mobility to be able to do that and spend time in an overhead position. But yeah, hopefully there's a lot of like kind of take homes and that. Hopefully there's a lot of things you can kind of apply to your own training. And if you've got any questions on any of the content there at all, just leave a comment. And since this is YouTube, obviously remember to like and subscribe.
That's something you're going to have to get practicing again, the posing.
Just holding them, that's a hard bit. You have some legs as well, I'm not just a men's physique guy.
Yeah.
I have to feed them again. That's the chest, can get some legs in it. Even have a bit of calf nowadays, fucking hell. I'm cramping my foot there. Maybe a bit better from this side.
For off season, you look pretty fucking yoked, like. I mean, you look pretty, like, you don't look fucking chubby.
This time, actually.